This episode contains massive spoilers for WandaVision, the Disney Plus Marvel show. It also contains spoilers for the rest of the MCU. Listen with caution. Listen up. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the podcast participants, and not to any participant's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. You know, for fun. So lighten up and enjoy. Stomping Jen.
What's my new name?
I'll tell people that in a moment.
Oh, okay.
But we are here this evening, recording to do a special episode.
Oh, I love special episodes.
A spectacular. That's what we call our special episodes.
Spectacular.
This is the WandaVision Spectacular.
Woohoo.
And we are going to be discussing what? Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? What will we be discussing?
WandaVision.
Which is what?
A TV show.
Right, the Disney TV show WandaVision. And we have a whole host of special guests that we will be introducing after the intro.
Sweet.
Good?
Yes,
All
let's
right,
do it.
Let's go.
The Soft Serve Podcast.
Creamy, delicious ideas without the creepy truck. Stomping Jen.
I'm not supposed to be something.
You are about to get your new identity.
Oh, great.
From henceforth,
Yeah.
for the WandaVision podcast, you are going to be known as Scarlett Jen.
Okay.
And joining us this evening to talk...
Wait, what's your secret identity?
Thank you, Scarlett Jen. This is already going well. I've got a list of 10 names I have to remember.
Oh, goodness.
My name will be Sawclops.
Sawclops.
Yes, after the X-Men character Cyclops.
Got it.
Get it? Instead of Cyclops, I'm going to be Sawclops.
Got it.
And also joining us this evening, Scarlett Jen, is a returning guest, Space Unicorn. Say hello, Space Unicorn.
Hello, Space Unicorn.
That's for humor. Good job. All right, are you excited to talk about WandaVision?
For like 2 questions, but sure.
Okay. All right, well, we'll get to you in a moment, okay?
Yep.
Let's say hello to our other guests. Let's start with our guest, Night Scrawler. Say hello, Night Scrawler.
Hello.
Is there anything you want to reveal about yourself, Night Scrawler? I know we're all on here using our secret superhero identities.
Oh, that I want to reveal.
You can be mysterious. You can remain a mystery to us all. That's fine.
Yeah, I think I'm going to disappear just like he does. Like Nightcrawler. Poof.
And Nightcrawler, that's a X-Men, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome, Night Scrawler.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here to talk about WandaVision with us. Let's go next to Mr. the Professor X. Say hello, Mr. the Professor X.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Anything you want to say?
I know what everyone's thinking.
Oh, excellent.
And I'm going to ask Night Scrawler to keep the bamfing to a minimum because it always smells like burning brimstone every time he bamfs here and there. So
now, is bamfing when this Nightcrawler teleports?
Yeah, but I can light a candle if you want.
All right. Well, Mr. the Professor X, thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Let's go next to this is a mouthful. It's Jason Madrox, the Multiple Ham. Welcome, Jason Madrox.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Hola, hello. And long live the sovereign mutant nation of Krakoa.
Whatever that means, I'll give it
It's a
an
deep cut.
It's a deep cut, and that
I'm coming out the gate hard.
we like the deep cuts, and this is an Avengers level assembly of comic book knowledge. So that's good. We like the deep cuts. Now that voice we just heard belongs to none other than Dynamite, I believe. Say hello, Dynamite.
Hello. The Big D, Big Daddy, Dynamite. They call me that because, sometimes it all goes spectacularly wrong and goes down in flames.
I feel like this could be one of those moments. Scarlett Jen. This is off to a great start. No, this is good. Thank you, Dynamite. We appreciate you being here. And last, but certainly not least, Space Unicorn Scarlett Jen is, I will say it, this guest has appeared multiple times on the podcast before. It's Mr. E.
Hello. It's marvelous to be here.
Oh, that was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Next hour.
Thank you for being here, Mr. E. Now, we all here presumably love comics, right? Scarlett Jen?
Mm-hmm. True story.
Guests?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
now I want to dive in here. I want to start out by asking just a question. I think this WandaVision, we're here to talk about this show WandaVision, which is the very first Disney television show designed to support the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Right? And I kind of wanted to start by asking you all just what your general impressions of the WandaVision show were. So kind of along the lines of, I liked it, it worked, or whatever else you want to say about it, without diving too deeply into it. I have 3 pages of very detailed questions for you all.
So we'll general overview.
General overview. We'll get into the details. Space Unicorn, I'm looking at you, so I'm going to start with you. What did you think of the WandaVision show?
It was pretty good. Pretty good.
You enjoyed it?
I did.
Is there anything in particular you enjoyed about it?
Just having more background information about what happened and the timelines and stuff.
Okay. Is Wanda a character that you felt like you wanted to know more about based on the movies?
Yeah, considering that we didn't really find much about her, like her background story.
Mm-hmm.
And how she arrived at the lab where they tested on her and her brother.
Yeah, and did you feel like you got all of that information? Do you feel like you came out of this show knowing more about Wanda?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. Scarlett Jen, since you're in the room here with me, what were your general impressions?
I very much enjoyed watching this debut television show that was produced by Disney for Marvel.
Okay.
Yes.
Anything in particular that you really liked about it?
I liked the mystery. I liked the moving up through the decades, the TV show aspect of it at the beginning, and then it, that it slowly unraveled the mystery. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
That's cool.
All right. Let's go to some of our other guests. Let's start with Night Scrawler here. What did general impressions of the WandaVision show? Anything else? Anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, I came out of it. I loved it. I came out of it way happier than I expected to going in. because I didn't really have a huge interest in either character. Vision was cool, Scarlet Witch was cool, but they never really gave them much in terms of story. And so I didn't really know if I was going to care or not. But the way that they approached it, I think that going about it in such an odd way, where, going through the different TV decades and all that, and trying to make you figure out what was going on, was such a great way to pull me in and then start to care about the characters on top of it. Because that model, that structure that they used was awesome. I loved that above all so far.
Yeah. Thank you. Dynamite, anything you want to add here? General impressions.
Just absolute genius. I think what's so fascinating is that the way they tell the story, like it had to be a TV show. The way they're telling the TV story plays into the actual story that they're telling. And I think there's just so many layers there that we can get into later. But just, like Night Scrawler, I did not particularly, I was not invested in the characters before this, but I will see anything they're in now.
Right.
Yeah. Jason Madrox, anything you'd like to add in terms of general impressions?
I thought it was not just a beautiful love letter to the sitcom, this beautifully constructed, this is everything that you love about TV. But it was also I came into it relatively interested in both Vision and the Scarlet Witch. I think Steve Englehart would be super proud, would be super jazzed about kind of how they handled the character, how they handled their relationship. And it really, I think, set the stage for kind of the next phase of the Marvel movies in a great way. Really provided a depth that you can't get on even 3 hours of movie time. So I was jazzed. It was fun.
Okay, thank you. Mr. the Professor X, additional thoughts in terms of general impressions?
I enjoyed the timeline when it was framed. It's sort of set between Marvel phases, right? It tells a story 3 weeks after the end of Endgame, and it sets up all kinds of cool storylines after that, right? It hints at some potential baddies in the future. And the way that it's it also hints at the existence of mutants in the MCU, which I will strongly argue in this space. Being a mutant myself, I think that mutant representation is really important as part of a diversity and inclusion initiative in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I will say that the way that they did this, both cinematically and sequentially, is similar for me in feel. I mean, not emotional feel, but kind of in style to something like Into the Spider-Verse, right? A new take, sort of a neat kind of artsy way to portray a storyline, especially in the first half of the storylines. And then Logan, what happens at the very end of the X-Men lifeline timeline, what happens after. So for me, it was a merging of those two.
Okay, thank you. Mr. E, what are your thoughts, general impressions after having watched WandaVision?
Well, I think for a TV show, it was, I think they did a good job of putting studio level and efforts into making it something very successful. I think they set a bar for it. And like a lot of Marvel movies, they put a lot of detail, and, it's in some ways it's, blink if you miss them. And so there's lots of stuff to go back and rewatch, and then you see other things that you might have missed in the first go. So I think it was a very solid show. It's appointment TV, kind of every Friday when it would be released. I think at the end it got a little choppy because it suffered from when the pandemic started. So they couldn't reshoot and they couldn't get everything they wanted back into it. That's why, for example, you only see Darcy in that 5-second drive by. But I think overall, I think it was really solid. It was, enjoyable to watch. And like some other folks said, it set some other things up and explored backstory in a really nice way.
Okay, thank you. Now, I have to admit, when I first heard Disney's plan to begin filling in the spaces between movies with these TV shows, I was a little skeptical, right? And when they only announced the names of the shows, when I heard the title WandaVision, I was like, what is this? This is going to be stupid. It's like, Disney doesn't know what they're doing. Personally, I'm glad to find out that wasn't the case for me. I mean, I thought it was a work of pure genius. And so it leads me to the question I want to put to all of you. Do you think this approach of trying to supplement the movies in the Marvel MCU with these TV shows is a good one? And do you think it's going to work going forward? Anyone want to talk to that? Have anything to offer? Dynamite, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's super smart. It really gives them the space to do those small character beats. You got the love story between Wanda and Vision, which was surprisingly, really well done and felt genuine. Like it's really amazing that they captured that, considering the amount of makeup and CGI that the actor is under. But it frees them up to make the movies sort of the spectacle and you can imagine a scenario where they hook you on the TV show. They're stringing you along with sort of the big bad guys lurking out here, and they're going to get you all the way to the end of the season without resolving that. And then you have to go to the movie theater and pay the full price to see the resolution to that storyline. So it's, from a business standpoint, it's very smart, and it really lets them, I think, get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and to speak to, I think, what Jason Madrox said, it provides a way to provide so much more detail that you can't get in a movie alone, right? Like, it just allows so much more expansive storytelling. At least that's what I think I heard the multiple hams say earlier. Do you want to go ahead and did you want to expound upon that, Jason Madrox?
Yeah, I feel like too, it's such a wonderful way to even provide kind of a level of fan service while doing this really smart business thing. Because to me, it felt like those limited runs that Marvel would put out that were 5 issues, that were these really short storylines to tie in larger crossover events. So it would be this 5-issue. There was even in the 80s a 5-issue WandaVision. Then that rolled into the larger Avengers story and the West Coast Avengers stories. And for me, it's such a great way to spend time and to do these kind of deeper character moments that you really can't get when you've got a squad of 30 characters deep, and when I go to the movies to watch basically anything, because I'm a garbage person, I want to see less Gabby, more stabby, more big explosions. I don't want to see a character lights, but Friday nights, that's a wonderful hour. Getting deep in the love of a synthezoid and a mutant. Although she's not a mutant anymore, I think.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask about that. I have questions about that. Are you leaving Space Unicorn?
Space Unicorn is done with this podcast.
All right.
Well, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Space Unicorn.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Mr. the Professor X has been frantically waving.
Yep, I see him. Mr. the Professor X, what do you have to say about these TV shows as a supplement to the MCU?
Well, I think that they play an essential component in making the broader MCU storylines accessible to the non-nerd audience. A lot of us, heard about Endgame and have been feeling Thanos' presence for years, right? This has been developing for 12 years or so, and we can, after Thanos' defeat, there needed to be a bridge from one phase to the next, right? And this played a really key role in establishing a few things through a really thoughtful storyline around grief and loss.
Yeah.
So it was really relatable.
Yeah, I feel like they tried to do a little bit of that in the second Spider-Man movie, Coming Home, but it
didn't quite hit home.
Skimmed the surface, right? Showed it on a broader scale,
right?
But this really, and it's funny. Mr. the Professor X mentioned a little while ago that the WandaVision show takes place 3 weeks after the events of Endgame, and I don't think I knew that until today. And I was doing some reading up. Is that what they said in the show?
Yeah. I mean, they had the whole at the end where she goes and she tries to get his body, and then she goes directly to New Jersey.
But I guess what I didn't know is how fresh Wanda's grief was, and like where she was placed in that timeline exactly. At least initially, it didn't occur to me. Maybe that was part of the mystery. I'm not sure, but
I have thoughts.
Go ahead, please.
I actually have thoughts.
Scarlett Jen, go, please.
Now I forgot them. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think for me, because there was all these movies that came out over the last couple of years, and I was never a Marvel comic fan. I read a lot of DC Vertigo growing up. That was my jam, not really much more mainstream comics. And so I didn't understand how any of this stuff connected. And then I thought that the movies, Infinity Wars, like brilliantly like brought all of these different movies together. And like you and I would talk about this frequently. And like you were like, oh, well, you have to watch all these movies. And I'm like, oh my God, so much movies, so much content. And then we watched the WandaVision. I think there was like 3 or 4 episodes in where I had to stop and I had to go back and rewatch some of the movies to even understand like where we were and what was happening. And so it's putting into context like all of this world building that they've put on into television and movies now.
Yeah, we did do that. We went back and rewatched all of the Avengers movies.
We had to watch Ultron because I was like so confused about who Vision actually was, and because you forget all the content. So I think it's brilliant what they're doing.
Yeah. Mr. E, please.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I think Scarlett Jen is making a good point. Like, it gives people who might not have gone and seen the other movies a couple of times, or might not have bought the DVDs or the Blu-rays and watched them a whole bunch of times, that having it all on one platform allows people to do just what she outlined, where you can say, oh, wait a minute. It's a way of attacking something that might be like so many movies, but you're able to piece them together yourself on them because they're all available right there, which is great. And I think just to follow up on the earlier point about it being 3 weeks after, I think that dulls some of like the messed up stuff that Wanda did. Had it been much longer afterwards, she takes over this town. That might have been more of like a dick move, but she did it in such within 3 weeks, where she was still suffering so much. It makes it a little bit less dick move. Like it's a little less. She was right in the middle of her her big huge moment that she was having in pain, and so like it makes it like less of a bad guy thing to do.
Yeah, and go ahead, Mr. Professor X, please.
Sorry, just thinking. I was just thinking as you were talking. Just think about the pain that Wanda must have been in, right? It wasn't that like the audience knows that Vision died, right? That he died and then he died again. So that sucks. But Wanda was he was the love of her life, and she had to kill him, right? Just for that effort to be just completely invalidated by the time stone, and then just to see that moment of getting the Soul Stone. Is it the Soul Stone?
Yeah.
Mind Stone.
The Mind Stone.
The Mind Stone. That's right. So getting the Mind Stone ripped out of his face, ripping out his heart, basically. Just imagine the sheer pain that she must have been going through. Like I would have been just numb for those 3 weeks. And it's totally understandable that she's not the bad guy here.
Well, let me ask a question. I mean, Wanda created this whole new reality in Westview, right? Out of a combination of real people that she basically held captive, right? And also she populated that world with creations of her mind. I mean, we could talk about this a little bit more, right? With, I'm going to call him Westview Vision, and then her kids, right? Tommy and Billy, I think. And I guess what I need to ask is what Wanda did. Let's not talk about whether she's good or evil right now, but is what she did wrong in some way? Is it objectively wrong? Can we view it that way? Who has thoughts about that? Night Scrawler, please.
So objectively wrong, and as far as like taking an entire town hostage or creating,
I think so. I think that's what I'm asking.
Living beings.
Yeah. I mean both, right? I mean, she took this town hostage and she created these, arguably, artificial but sentient beings with her magic that she ended up having to kill. So, like,
Right.
was that wrong?
I mean, I think that they set up pretty well that it started off kind of as an beyond her control. Like it was just a kind of outpouring of grief that created it all. And she didn't fully understand what she was even doing until sort of midway through, as things from the real world started breaking in, like when the radio, when the FBI agent was talking to her through the radio, those little moments started to kind of snap her out of it, where she started realizing that there was something going on and maybe she had to do with it. And she clearly didn't want to acknowledge that. And she kind of went into that denial. So once she became conscious of what she was doing and she was holding people hostage, then for sure that's wrong. As far as Vision went, I like how when he asked, "What am I?" That part got me, like, really. He said, "What am I?" And she said, "You are the part of the Mind Stone that lives inside me." Because when she was a kid and the agents there from Hydra tapped, or where she touched the stone and then, like, she saw the Scarlet Witch and all that stuff, and part of the Mind Stone entered into her. I don't think that she necessarily created him as much as sort of like the Mind Stone, because the stones are all sort of live on their own. And I think that its outpouring was almost a combination of her grief and maybe some of her will, but also the Mind Stone's own power. So I don't think that she necessarily created Vision. As far as the kids go, that's for me the biggest question: is what are those kids? Are they from another dimension because they're talking about the multiverse and all that coming up, or is that something she just purely manifested from wherever inside of herself? So that's I don't know the answer to that one.
Anyone have thoughts on that? I see Jason Madrox's hand going up, and then we'll go to Dynamite. Jason Madrox.
I mean,
yep.
I want to I just want to aspect, because I mean, if I'm gonna play Mephisto advocate, like I think you can't say it's not objectively wrong. She took all of these people without their consent and dramatically altered their lives. In a position where no matter what happens from that point forward, they have to deal with what she's done to them. And so there's kind of no like easy way to say like, well, that's, she had no right to do that. But then it kind of ends this place of being like, well, when you're dealing with that level of power, and I think it's an ongoing theme through most of like Marvel's, God, their entire cast is what responsibility comes when you have that level of power, and when you can express that power, and really no one can do anything about it. And it's hard to not say at some point she had a responsibility to the rest of the world because of the power that she had. And as for the kids, I you know, it's interesting to see how they're going to move forward with it. You know, it play from their creation, Disillusion, play such an interesting role in kind of the Marvel universe, the Marvel Comics universe, for 30 years. And so I'm really curious about kind of what the larger role they're going to play is, you know, and where they came from, you know, opens the door to an entire new kind of untapped mythos in Marvel. You know, because they have a well-established, you know, history in the comic books, but will they translate that, or will it be a question of where in the multiverse did they come from? Will it follow kind of the Marvel storyline of how she creates them? And I don't want too many spoilers for 30-year-old comics, but you know, it's for me that I'm curious. Like my nerd radar is up, and I'm just really dying to find out what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, before I go to Dynamite, I'll offer my own impression as somebody who hasn't read the comics, right? I don't have a deep knowledge, and maybe I'll be surprised by this, but my thought was that they were just manifestations of her magic, and that they weren't real. I mean, nobody has to respond to that, but I'm curious if anybody else, or no one has to respond to my thoughts about it, but if you want to share your own about it, I really do want to hear that. But Dynamite, you were next up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, there's kind of an interesting thing that happens where, okay, so she sees Vision's dead body, you know, she's sort of like trying to process this grief. She goes to the place that he's bought, and then, I mean, like, I guess at this point she like loses control of herself, of her powers, and like through like her imagination, like imagines this life that could have been, and like takes control of this entire town and creates the Hex, right? And you know, for me that's kind of interesting because it does take, again, this the form of this escapist fantasy of like the sitcom where like nothing bad ever really happens and everything is fixed within 30 minutes.
Yeah. Anybody else I'm curious if you have thoughts about, are the kids real? Like, are they, you know, or are they just merely manifestation, or does that even matter if they're just manifestations of her magic? Mr. E, then the Professor X.
I think, you know, there are different stories in the actual comics, but I think one thing that Marvel has managed to, you know, on the whole successfully do is they have like a really core, you know, strong core thread that they're doing through all of these movies, and the way that they're sort of bringing in what they can. So they might keep the kids as something, you know, like as kind of like what you described, where she manifested them. But, you know, at the very end, you hear one of them calling to her. And so I think, like, my guess is what you'll see is like her trying to pull them in, you know, and that might be like from one reality to another. But like, I think they might not have, before this all happened, they might not have existed anywhere. They were something that, you know, that she brought to life because she had this thing, you know, this idea of what was going to happen. And then she had this great surge of, you know, raw anger and heartbreak. And then she was able to pull them into existence by creating them. And then she might be able to like fish them out, you know, somewhere, or that may be what she tries to do next, and pulling them in. And that might cause some chasms and such. But I think in the way that the MCU is doing it is she kind of thought them into existence in her little bubble. And then we'll see how like she's able to pull them back in at all.
Mr. the Professor X, did you have thoughts you wanted to offer?
Yeah, just to add that in the comics, the kids were real as long as she was around, right? And if she wasn't around, they would disappear. The other angle that I wanted to add is that there have been some explanations about all of this, that she's inadvertently in her toggling through timelines and alternate realities that she's inadvertently tapped into Mephisto's work, magic.
Who is Mephisto? I don't even know who that is. I know Jason mentioned Mephisto earlier. Now you're mentioning this character. Can you tell me who that is? I literally don't know.
He's a big baddie. He's an immortal. Maybe Jason can expand on that a little bit better than I can.
Dynamite's raising his hand.
Yep. Or Dynamite.
He's the literal devil in the Marvel universe.
Okay. So
so in the Marvel universe, hell is like its own dimension. It's not this abstract concept. It's like this a place. And so the question whether or not the twins are alive or not is kind of irrelevant, because you then have to question, what does alive mean when Mephisto is like the devil and yet he's alive, right? So it could be argued that the twins are parts of Wanda's magic, dark magic. It could be argued that there are parts of Mephisto that she's then toggling into her experience. But in either case, I think when they were alive, they were real, and now they're not, right? But there's elements of them still out there calling out to her. So that's, I think, what's happening at the final scene in WandaVision, that she's trying to reach out to them in some way, which is going to mess things up even more.
I think too, this gets a little bit to, is Vision real? Certainly their relationship within the Hex feels real.
Right.
And he behaves, certainly in a very real way. So, are the children real? And in a certain context, they are.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm getting at is they're more. I'm trying to understand is, while she's in the Hex, while they're there, they're more than just figments of her imagination, right? They are beings, right? They are alive in a sense, right? That's what I'm hearing. Jason,
in every sense,
yeah.
And I would agree with that. And I think that there's the great moment of the series in which Hex Vision is talking to the reconstituted Vision, and they have that back and forth. And excuse me, remembering the game they were playing around the boat. That, was Vision ever real to begin with? He's a synthezoid. He's an artificial creation. He's the merger in the MCU. The Mind Stone. Bruce Banner's thought pattern, Stark's thought pattern, Jarvis's AI pattern, and it's cobbled together and built together to create this thing. And they treat it real. And he was as much brought into beings as Wanda's children, just through technology, through kind of this thing that happened in the Age of Ultron. And so we treat him as real. We don't have any questions about like the reality of Vision in the greater Marvel universe. So what does that separate from kids? They were thinking, feeling, autonomous, sentient creatures inside the Hex, and where that comes from and where they kind of how they came into be, I think is a great question that I'm sure Marvel's going to explore. And for me, that's a really fascinating question around when you bring around these kind of like forces of these how do we, it's like, what is a person? Like, to call in your phone. Oh, sorry. Yes.
And yes,
I can.
Thanks. We value Jason Madrox's words so much. We're just trying to set up an alternative way for him to get in here and offer them. So we're going to work on that. And I wanted to. I was surprised at how powerful Wanda was, right? Like, I think we saw signifiers of that in some of the movies, but to be able to be able to manifest life, right, in a sense. I don't think we've seen characters as powerful as Wanda up to this point. Maybe except for Thanos, but he had all the Infinity Stones, right? Anybody want to? I mean, am I off base here in thinking that Wanda may be the most powerful character we've seen up to this point? Dynamite.
I mean, I think they certainly say that within the series. They said, she could have gone toe to toe with Thanos, and I think, at least in the context of the Hex, what we're seeing represented is basically the same powers as the Reality Stone. I think even like some of the ways that like when Vision is breaking up, like the way that visual effect happened, I think resembles in a lot of ways what happened when Thanos was using the Reality Stone to like chop up like the Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever. And I mean, I think in some ways, I think that there will be callbacks to this for the next phase of Marvel with the Doctor Strange movie, which is the Multiverse of Madness. I mean, fundamentally what she did is create her own pocket dimension, right? With her own, projections that she's created that are, for all intents and purposes, real. And then she drew all of the other people from that area into that dimension.
Pocket dimension.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
So, I want to get into some of the gritty details here. Mr. E, please, before we do that.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say, it's kind of interesting to, I'm just thinking about it now. We're sort of like debating like what's real or not, but about about a whole series of things that are not real, right? Like, WandaVision, or like they're not real, but we're talking about like what's real. Like it's kind of a little meta, right? Like people made up the Marvel universe, decades ago, but like, is Iron Man real? Like, like it's kind of like they'd be having that discussion. Like there are things that were made up and brought to life ish, and like, is that real? And like that's the kind of like the debate within the MCU about this pocket dimension that like kind of going on. But the other thing I was just going to a point or two ago, like I mentioned, at the very end we saw or we heard like one of the kids reach out to her. I'm wondering like the Mephisto point, if that is the beginning of something else trying to manipulate her. I don't know if there was manipulation all through the series, but maybe Mephisto was just hanging out and he's like, oh, what's going on over there? And then this is their step in, to like causing something to happen later. So
yeah, that's a good.
We can move on.
That's a Night Scrawler. Go ahead.
I was going to say that makes sense, and that's a good point, because if you think about it, Agatha was all about the kids, and just like she was the one responsible for bringing Pietro back, for her to be so interested in the kids makes a lot of sense that she might have had a hand in that, because everyone thinks that she might have been operating through, or Mephisto might have been operating through her as well. There was that, I don't know if anybody knows about the whole side story that they wanted to add about the rabbit that she had. But Agatha had this rabbit that they kept showing when she was babysitting the kids. And apparently they had a scene that they had filmed, but they couldn't complete it in time for the end of the series, in which the rabbit turns out to actually be a demon. Whether or not that demon was supposed to be Mephisto or not, they didn't say. I don't think it was supposed to be, but it was like a demon that resulted in like a Goonies style chase through the caverns in her basement.
That would be interesting.
But anyway, yeah. Side note.
Before we go to you, Dynamite, Mr. Professor X, did you have anything you wanted to add on that? Thought I saw your hand.
Lost my train of thought. Keep going.
Okay, Dynamite.
I mean, certainly, yeah, could it be Mephisto? Possibly. I'm just not sure why they wouldn't use Dormammu from Doctor Strange, because like there's already a character there, that they haven't really finished up with. So, I mean, they make tweaks with these movies certainly all the time, like Ultron from the comics, his creator is Hank Pym, not Tony Stark, but I kind of wonder if they might go that route and have Dormammu show up again.
Yeah, and Mr. E mentioned this Agnes and Agatha Harkness person who are one and the same, right? Agnes was the friendly neighbor who was always in the right place, and in the context of the TV show, and also when they were outside of the TV show as well, but who turned out to be this really powerful witch, right? Named Agatha Harkness. Now, I've never heard of this character before. Is this somebody that hardcore fans were happy to see, surprised to see? Tell me about this character. Jason Madrox.
So I was really jazzed to see Agatha Harkness. I did. It was one of those Marvel moments where I think that being a fan, there wasn't a surprise. Agatha Harkness and the Scarlet Witch have a long history, especially in the Marvel comics, where she was part teacher, part mentor. She was actually the one in, I can't remember if it was John Byrne or if it was Stephen Englehart. I don't remember which run it was, where Agatha actually blocks the Scarlet Witch's memories of her children so that she could kind of get over the grief of their disappearance in the comics. And then, sets up basically a ticking time bomb that explodes 30 years later in the Bendis storylines. But she had always kind of been around through the Marvel comics as, I want to say, like a counterpoint to Doctor Strange, but like as another powerful mystic magic user in the Marvel universe. So it was cool to see her, and they did tweak her character, because my reading of her was she's not necessarily evil, but she's almost like chaotic neutral, like to use D&D terms.
Yeah.
Like, so it was an interesting take on her to see her position more as a villain, especially given the character's history in the comics. So yeah.
Yeah. What say you, Mr. the Professor X?
The thought came back, and it sorry, I don't want to derail, but
no, go ahead.
Just thinking about Mephisto and this being fits into all of this, right? And its influence on this show specifically, this sort of storyline. And one of the things that, if he is the devil, or if he characterizes himself as the devil, and he oversees a place, hell or Hades or whatever he wants to call it, and he entraps human souls, right? Then what better way to get more human souls than to bring the Scarlet Witch forward, right? To help her develop through Agnes, right? And to have her lose her mind in having their children reaching out, or right, the voice of her child reaching out to her, because as Agnes told us, she is the Scarlet Witch, the one who is destined to destroy the universe.
Now, do you think? So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So it could be that Mephisto is screwing with this to like fast forward her development to then, as with Ragnarok, right? It was about causing Ragnarok to then, that large devil that destroyed, Asgard, that maybe the Scarlet Witch does the same to the universe, right? And so that would then feed him with all kinds of souls. But that's sort of just a quick fan theory that came to mind.
Now, is it possible that this Mephisto sent Agatha Harkness there to awaken the Scarlet Witch, and then when she got a taste of Wanda's powers, she decided to try to steal them? Because it seemed like that she was. It seemed like at some point she decided, I'm going to take Wanda's powers and prevent her from being the Scarlet Witch. We'll go to Jason, then Dynamite, then Mr. E.
Yeah, I think that's 100% possible. And I think that like Mephisto represents like the devil in the Marvel universe, but like to understand like kind of how broad that is, though the idea of the Marvel universe there isn't just one hell in the Marvel universe. There's hell dimensions across like numerous different like beliefs, and there's like the Asgardian version of hell spelled with one L. There's limbo. There's all of these various hell dimensions, along with the dimension that Mephisto resides in. And he isn't just the ruler of his dimension; he is the lord of all hells. And so, like all of these other devil characters from all of these other beliefs and their own dimension are like, oh well, you know, he's like the dawn of the devils. Like, well, we got to pay up the line to Mephisto. And I could see him sitting there and seeing the blip and being like, what's going on over there? Like, that's weird. And then kind of seeing these powers and moving subtly, like, because unlike Thanos, who was a fist pounding against the wall of the universe, Mephisto is more like, you know, the slow leak that causes an ice fissure in a wall. He moves very like subtly. And so the idea that he notices it and starts moving Agatha to Wanda, like, would fit with the character. Like, and I think it would, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Dynamite.
I think we want to be careful not to rob Agatha for agency here, because I think she's a powerful witch in her own right. She has her own resources. She has her own agenda. And I think she did things consistent with that agenda. Certainly if she's able to drain power, you know, she's attracted to this massive outpouring of magic. All of that stuff was internally consistent. And I don't think it really requires Mephisto or some other cosmic level power to try and influence her to be there. Set
Mephisto aside. Do you think she wanted to initially awaken the Scarlet Witch in her, or
no? I think she was there to try and learn more, to gather power. I think really there's that really fascinating episode where she's like walking her through the memories and like in a way sort of serving as that mentor, where she's like inadvertently telling her like, oh, you know, here's the sigils in my sanctum, so you can't cast magic. Right. I think that was a really fascinating character dynamic they had, but something that we're kind of skipping over and is, you know, sort of the big MacGuffin is the Darkhold. You know, in the comics, the Darkhold is a book of great power. It is, you know, I would say unabashedly evil in some ways. Written by, I think, Chthon, which is sort of their like Cthulhu, Marvel's Cthulhu kind of deity. And basically nothing good ever comes of reading it. So, you know, the bigger question for me is like, what's going to come out of her having, you know, not just awakened the Scarlet Witch, but really it's that sort of, she's gained that self-knowledge and now she's sort of researching the darkest magic, and where's that going to lead us? And again, I don't know that we even necessarily need sort of a cackling devil or whatever to be pulling the strings, although that certainly could be one of the character beats.
Yeah. We'll go to Mr. E, hear his thoughts, then we'll go to Mr. the Professor X. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think right, like I'm sorry, Dynamite is right. I think Agatha, she, like, you know, sensed or saw that something was going on. She went to investigate. And I think we see her in that episode that was really great, you know, with, you know, they walked through memories. She was investigating. She's like, okay, what is this? And I think, you know, she might have flip-flopped back and forth between like, what, you know, what is this? You know, can I teach this person and partner with this person? Okay, she might be a little unstable. How do I get this power? So I think, you know, she might have gone back and forth a little bit and then arrived at like, all right, I am going to steal this shit. Right. So I'm going to take this from her and I'm going to do me good. And that's, you know, what happened, you know, and what we saw play out. And I also agree that, like, you know, the Darkhold might be like a bigger something coming, you know, and then what we see coming next or in the future. I just wonder about, like, how and if Mephisto actually gets brought in, because, like, I don't think they can go full, like, oh, he's the huge devil, because you can't, once you jump that shark and you beat him, what's left for people to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he might come in, but it might not be like the big, huge devil. He might be something else when he comes through. So I think that goes along with, not making too big a deal out of this thing when it could be, it could be other players at work.
Could he possibly be like a Phase 5 big bad? Like after whatever they do with this cosmic stuff coming up in Phase 4? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think the problem with Mephisto is that as such a cosmic being, it's a little tough to work with him narratively. And so what you end up with is a scenario like with the original Doctor Strange movie, where like in order to beat him, you have to just come up with like a clever way of boxing him into, like, oh, he's agreed to something that he can't fulfill, or, your typical sort of like, classic writing, like somebody makes a deal with the devil and finds a loophole to like get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He
could also end up being like he could also end up being something like a pen name where like, there's like, oh, you don't want to anger Mephisto, or it hits him when it's really somebody else. So it could be like, kind of like the great and powerful Oz, like, but it's really somebody else behind the curtain.
I just don't want a character like that to have been the rabbit that Agatha was holding. That's all.
No. Well, Mr. I read.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I read a lot of like different theories about what's up with the rabbit.
Yeah.
And the one I liked the best was that she, like, Doctor Strange had like also like, WTF? Let me go up and find out what's going on. And she captured him and made him a rabbit. Like, that was secretly Doctor Strange all along.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Cool.
Mr. The Professor X, you wanted to get in on this.
Yeah, just wanted to tie in a couple of ideas that I've heard so far, and thanks everybody for a great discussion. The thing about Mephisto is that he's deeply manipulative, right? He moves again in the shadows very, very slowly. He's an immortal, right? So human life, what's happened over the last 12 years, or the timeline that's existed, even if you think about Captain America's existence in the 40s or 50s, 1940s or 50s, when that sort of started, would be just a blink of an eye for a guy like Mephisto. So he has time. Mm-hmm. Thanos didn't have time, right? As a big bad, he knew that the universe was going to end, and that, or rather, many worlds in the universe were going to end unless he did this. Right. This was his calling. And I don't think that Mephisto would have like sent Agatha in the same way that Thanos sent Loki. Right. I think it would be more like he influenced Agatha in some way.
Right. He might have made sure that she got the Darkhold.
Right. Exactly. And to speak to Agatha's sense of agency and power, as powerful as Agatha is that's not in dispute here. She's a very powerful witch. She did make clear that she had to study a lot. Right. And especially from the Darkhold, and what she saw in Wanda. And she didn't know that Wanda was a Scarlet Witch. She was trying to test that theory. She wanted to know if she was, because it was kind of fishy. But as powerful as she was, again, she was, a study. She absorbed power from other people. She had to like feed her own, power to become more powerful. And yet, here is Wanda Maximoff, right? Which, by the way, Agatha suggested that she, when she was trapped under the rubble, she was the one who used her nascent power at that time for the Tony Stark missile or ordnance not to explode. So that then suggests that she could have had mutant abilities from the beginning. And in fact, if we look at the comics and how Wanda is characterized, she's a class 5, right? Class 5 mutant in the likes of like Magneto and Phoenix and all of that. So she's quite powerful, and she was able to defeat Agatha without study. So imagine how powerful she's going to be.
Yeah, and I want to ask about that. And thank you, Mr. Professor X. Night Scrawler. Is this what she was reading at the end, Wanda? Was she flipping through and hover Wanda? I mean, at that point, she's the Scarlet Witch, right? She's reading this Darkhold.
Yeah, she's doing the Doctor Strange move from Endgame, where she's like speed reading that, basically looking at all the different options all at once in that book. And so then when she's hearing the kids, that's why it felt like that was something she was picking up on, that they were in some other realm or reality or whatever. But Dynamite's got something.
Yep. I want to ask real quick, Night Scroll, your opinion. Does reading the Darkhold make one evil? Like, is the act of assimilating that information make you evil or no?
Oh, that I don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Dynamite.
So it depends on the media. There's been there's actually a comic book run called Darkhold Pages from the Book of Sin, which is sort of about like there's like a group of like cultists that kind of like worship the book, and like they're trying to recover all of the pages, but like the pages are sort of out in the world, and there's kind of these cursed items, and they end up in people's hands, and like anybody that ends up with one of the pages and uses it always goes bad, right? Like it's sort of all like classic horror tropes where it's like, oh, you can bring back this person but died, but actually they're a vampire or something horrible like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all dark, bad magic. Is reading it necessarily going to corrupt her? No. But certainly using any of it is not going to go well. And I think they did that also on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They had a whole season where they had the Darkhold. So it's a little bit of a tie-in. I mean, the graphic art is a little different than what they had in this show. So I don't know that it's, again, we're talking multiverse. Like, is it the exact same one? Are they going to treat it the same way? Not necessarily. But in the S.H.I.E.L.D. run, basically nothing good ever came out of it.
And Mr. Reed, do we know whether or not Doctor Strange has read the Darkhold? Was that in his library of books, or was that something he read when he went and got trained?
So in the Doctor Strange movie, when the scenes where they're in the library, you see several places where books are missing. Mm-hmm. And so it's like conceivable that the Darkhold is one of the ones that's missing or was stolen at some point or what have you, but it's not there now.
Okay.
So that's like one tie-in there. And I think like it's the Darkhold is kind of, to use another metaphor, it's like the dark side, like, it's super powerful. And once you start using it, you turn bad eventually. So it's that kind of idea that that could and would happen. But in the very end scene of WandaVision, you see her first out in that kind of like lone Bruce Banner cabin out in the middle of the wilderness. She's having coffee, and then they go in and show her also there, which was like a slight thing showing that how, she is more powerful than Doctor Strange, because when he did it, he was asleep and studying. She was out there having coffee and doing that at the same time. So she's like, they're simply showing like how much greater she is with power than he is.
Jason Madrox, what do you have to say?
Well, I think that like they established like in the Doctor Strange film, when it's Strange and Wu in the library, that like no knowledge is off limits. That they don't like ban a sorcerer from studying anything. But the question is like, what do you do when you have that kind of knowledge? What do you do when you have access to something that is arguably evil? And I think it goes back to that idea that, again, I think it's underlying most of Marvel is where is the personal responsibility, and when you're given access to that. Although I do agree, and that was a beautiful deep cut about the Darkhold series, that like nothing good ever comes from it. Like it's not going to turn out well.
Yeah.
Now I want to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Why?
That's what I know.
Oh.
Because when Willow turns bad and she learns all this dark magic and she becomes a villain.
So a similar kind of theme.
Similar theme,
right?
yes. Yes. Similar theme.
Joss Whedon plays a big role in the MCU, so I'm always down to talk about some Buffy. Love to see her show up in the next Blade movie.
Yeah. Before I do want to talk about where Wanda ends up kind of at the end. But I want to come back to that, and I want to explore a little bit more about Vision, right, in that character in this series, because we've had some spirited online debates about. I like what Jason called him, Hex Vision versus real world Vision, right, or White Vision, I guess is what he's called is in the comics. And I think, how do I want to ask this? So White Vision is created out of, I guess, Endgame Vision's body, his corpse, right? They reconstruct the Endgame Vision's dead body to make White Vision.
Yeah, I think they like do that and they like boot up his backup software.
But then he kind of merges in a way. So Hex Vision takes his memory. Hex Vision takes his own Hex memories and implants them into White Vision, right? And then White Vision then kind of says, well, I am Vision, and he flies away, right? I think that's what happens. Mm-hmm. So we have these two visions. We have these two visions now, right?
Wait, we can't go past the idea of the ship of Theseus, that conversation that they had.
What?
Okay, help me out here, Mr. the Professor X.
It wasn't like there was two visions and then all of a sudden there's like one vision that left and one vision that it was much, much deeper than that. That moment where they're sort of floating around having that discussion is critically important to Vision's future. The idea here around the ship of Theseus was that Hex Vision explains to White Vision that there's an artifact in the museum, right? It's made of planks of wood. It's an ancient ship. And over time, those planks of wood rot and are replaced with new planks because, right, you want to keep the ship so that people can come and observe. But once none of the planks remain, is it still the ship of Theseus?
No, it's a replica.
Well, that's the point.
That would be my argument.
Well, that was the point that they were making.
Right.
So part of what Hex Vision was arguing, and anybody please jump in here, was that maybe those pieces of rot, the places where there were dings and stains and rot, maybe that's what the places where there were parts missing. Maybe that was the ship of Theseus, those memories. And they use the word memories very, very clearly. And so when we talk about the transfer of memories from Hex Vision to White Vision, it feeds into that analogy that really, really important in an important way, because now Vision is not just feeding White Vision the memories of all the movies we've seen so far that Vision has appeared in, but also the memories of him having a family with Wanda, of the two kids, of their lives together. And now that all of that stuff, all of those memories are within White Vision. And I think that's going to lead to some really interesting plot opportunities.
I think this is one of the things that I love about Marvel is that they go very deep on a lot of this stuff, but fundamentally what they do, right, is they take an existing idea and then they just say, what about X, but with superheroes, right? So they took The Good Place, right? They're like, let's have this show about this like weird fictional place with a bunch of philosophical discussion, but put superheroes in it, right? The Captain America, the Winter Soldier, they're like, what if we did a political thriller, but with superheroes? Ant-Man was like, what if we did an action comedy, but with superheroes? And it's just so smart because it keeps it fresh because every movie feels different. They all have kind of their own internal logic. They're talking about the next Doctor Strange being like much more of like kind of a horror, scary movie, which I'm pretty stoked for.
Mm-hmm. Jason Madrox.
Well, I just want to touch on when you so confidently said, no, it's a replica. Well, let me pose this: if the ship of Theseus is made of the same parts, if it literally the planks are taken from the same tree, the rope is woven from the same hemp, the sails are constructed of the same fabric, where is the replication? It lies in the memory. And I think, Mr. Professor put it so well that it becomes a question of what houses the memory of this thing, of either the ship or, in this case, Vision. White Vision versus Hex Vision, just based on what we know of Hex Vision, he isn't real. He isn't the real Vision. And yet somehow we treat him more real than we do the White Vision when White Vision shows up. Hex Vision was never part of the Avengers. Hex Vision never fought Thanos. Hex Vision never sacrificed his life only to be killed again. White Vision or Chalk Vision did, but he held none of those memories when we meet him. And so he arguably, when we meet him, we're like, oh, that's not the real Vision. That's not, that's a fake Vision. It's that moment of like, who and what houses the memory of the thing that we create. It's a really deep moment.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is beautifully deep.
Yeah. And before we go to Night Scrawler, I want to add, like, my reaction was that, White Vision, was the quote unquote real Vision, right? That was my feeling towards him all along, and that, he had gotten the core of himself stolen by Thanos when the Mind Stone was ripped out of him, right? And then he was kind of restored when Hex Vision, who I feel like, based on our earlier conversation, was real in a sense, put his memories into White Vision. He became fully restored, but also got all this extra stuff. But Night Scrawler, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
So real quick, two things on this one, because that scene was awesome. I loved it. And that conversation was great. And when Hex Vision passed his memories on to White Vision, I had two thoughts about it. One was, okay, Chalk Vision, I like that one. That's funny. Chalk Vision suddenly, to me, became the official real Vision because he's made of physical materials. He can actually leave the hex and whatnot. And now he has the memories. He was kind of turned on by the power from Wanda, that when they put the drone in, it kind of got charged up with her magic, which is also powered by the Mind Stone. So that's how they kicked him to life. So I was like, okay, White Vision, he's the real one now. Hex Vision, two things with him. One was, where did he get Vision's actual memories from? Because Wanda doesn't have his memories. So those had to have come, I guess, from the Mind Stone that lives inside her, which was what she said when she created him, because he had memories that she doesn't have. And so for him to pass those to the White Vision, it was like, well, that had to have come from somebody other than Wanda. And then the other thought I had was, if Chalk Vision is the real Vision now, and he has all these experiences and he feels all these things, why did he not immediately go to the center of town and help her and his family get out of that situation, rather than just like jet? Is he like, ooh, I'm out and he's gone? I didn't understand that. So, I mean, obviously there's a reason for it.
Yeah, he did fly out. Now, I see we're all eager to jump in on this. I'm going to go to Mr. E, then we'll go to Dynamite, then we're going to go back to Mr. the Professor X. Mr. E, you're...
Yeah, no, I would just like to, for the, don't forget that, Vision, to super water it down, is a computer, right? And so like memories and everything, like, that Wanda might not have been a part of, stored somewhere on his drive somewhere, right? And so he could have at the same time, been like, here's some stuff that I've got, and also allowed him to access what was going on, beforehand. And then, the other part of this is, we're talking about the vision, where, if we think about it, and what kind of touching on what we were talking before, there at one point, why does there only be one, right? There's, there were two visions for some time in the Hex area, right? They were both a vision, whereas the replies like, there can be only one. And this is not I don't think that's really the situation. They kind of left it somewhere in the middle where there was two for a moment, but then they went on.
Mm-hmm. Dynamite, I think you were up next.
Yeah. So as a point of clarification, Hex Vision does not have many memories. He does not remember being an Avenger.
Okay.
So he actually only has, I think he has sort of like Wanda's version of events severely edited down. Like she's not going to, she didn't like create him to know that he'd been murdered, etc. And then I think his memories is sort of that emotional core from the Soul Stone, which I mean, we see when she's creating him, like there's those lines of like yellow sort of flying out of her.
Yeah.
In addition to all of sort of the red energy that she's throwing off. So like there's something additional there that's happening that I think is allowing him to manifest in like a very complete sense and have that sort of emotional life with her that like is so clearly there. Then Ship of Thesis thing, like, the White Vision or whatever, he comes in, he has backups of those memories of being a part of the Avengers, but because of the lack of the Soul Stone, like he has none of that like emotional intelligence. And so like maybe at some points, in that scene where they, have that sort of moment together and he says, I am the Vision, maybe he's gaining some of that back, or at least if not becoming emotional, because I suspect they'll want to draw that out a bit longer. He at least will have access to some of his own memories and some of that memory, and that will help influence how he develops as a character. I mean, that's sort of the point of the Ship of Thesis thing is like, is it the rot that makes it the real thing? Is it sort of our experiences that shape us? And that gets obviously much more complicated when you're talking about a synthetic being that has, regular backups of his memories.
Yeah. So we still think there's more reconciling that the Vision is going to have to do in future content. Mr. the Professor X.
So just wanted to bring back one thing around whether something is real or a copy, right? The human body constantly replaces its cells every 7 years.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And, at 44, I don't think I'm a copy of what I was when I was 7, right? So that there's continuity there. The other thing I wanted to bring to the foreground is that Vision will work in much the same way as Ultron did, where Ultron had many, many, many copies of himself, and he could download or send his consciousness, or there was his consciousness in each one of those, right? So it's that ability to, because he's a digital being, right? He's sort of the software. It's not just the body. It's the software. It's the coding almost, so to speak, that makes Vision. And finally, just to think about, this new Vision, Chalk Vision, has this programming like likely clumsily shoved into his brain, right? And so he's like stuck there. He's got this programming to like kill the Vision, and now he's the Vision, so like that's screwing up with that programming. Then he's got all this other Wanda and this sort of chaos magic coursing through him. He's got the memories of Vision, that realization that, wait a minute, I am Vision.
He's going to get a blue screen of death.
Right. And so there are theories out there that he's going somewhere to get that,
to get his head straight.
Yeah, and I'll also bring forward
the genius bar, I'm presuming.
Yeah. Wakanda. But there's also, Marvel's also messing around with like memory lapse with Gamora's character coming back, right? And so like, so there's that issue also. So it sounds like they're getting really like sophisticated in the way they're thinking about grief and loss and memory, and like, how do you rebuild your life?
I want to touch on something you just said, Mr. the Professor X, and I'm going to ask this question to Jason Madrox. I was going to ask, where did Vision go? Do we think he's off to Wakanda to try to get some physical and mental reconciliation?
I'm going to say no to that. Like, I don't think he's going to Wakanda, but I think he is probably going to, like, we two things. So one, Vision was still very much developing into some kind of existence at the end of Infinity War. He was still kind of moving and becoming something in reality entirely new, and I find Vision to be a fascinating character because he is really this interesting post-human character. His humanity is something that he constructs and that he builds and that he was in the process of creating. And he says it at the end of Infinity War when they're going to take him to Wakanda to have the Mind Stone removed. He's like, I'm this, I'm part this, I'm part this. Like, and if you take this away, because remember, they'd gone to Wakanda initially to remove the Mind Stone so that she could destroy it without killing Vision. And he seemed confident that he could find a new existence. I think he's going to go and just try to find what makes him relatable to human, what makes him different from human. And I don't think he'll find that in another lab. I think he's going to go wander the earth for a while and try to figure out, where he fits in it, because he is a singularly unique being. There is nothing like him in the universe. So
Scarlett Jen, please.
Sorry. When you said that, Jason, it made me think of who's the blue guy that goes and lives on Mars in Watchmen?
Dr. Atomic?
Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know why, but that was
Yeah.
I think there's a beautiful synergy between where Dr. Manhattan is at the end of the Watchmen series and where we have this Vision at now, where he's become something so unique and so powerful. So
yeah.
Dynamite, then Mystery.
So I think there's really only two places that the sort of newly reconstituted Vision can go. He's going to be looking for answers. One place you might look for answers is in your creator. So I think we might see Ultron again, just as a, hey, I've been working on being a person, but let's explore my more synthetic side. And what does that mean? What was the plan for me, et cetera. And, all kinds of interesting storylines could come out of that. Certainly.
Can I ask a question about that? Ultron is gone, right? And Tony Stark is gone.
Yeah, but Ultron is never gone.
Okay.
He is like Vision. He is a robot with programming.
Okay.
And in the comics, at least, he's always got a backup somewhere.
Okay. All right. So we may see Ultron again. Okay. Sorry to cut you off, please.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So it's there's that, or bearing in mind, his exposure to Wanda and magic. Maybe he goes to talk to Doctor Strange as their sort of resident expert on what happened, what am I, what's going on. But my suspicion is that, probably Ultron would be a more interesting character beat for them to pursue and bring back as, whether or not he's the big evil guy for an entire movie or just a subplot, whatever. It could be fun.
Yeah. Before we go to Mystery, I'll just say if they do bring back Ultron, I hope it's in a non humanoid / robotic manifestation, and it's something different, and Vision engages with Ultron in a different way. I don't want him to fight Ultron or sit down to talk to Ultron and have it go bad and then they're beating each other up, or I really want them to do something different and interesting with whatever that looks like, just as a casual fan. I've had enough of the Ultron that we saw running around in Age of Ultron.
Here's my Marvel pitch meeting for you.
Yeah.
What about Westworld, but with Vision?
All right, Mr. E, what were your thoughts?
Oh, so I was just gonna say, like, to the point where does he go? And like, I like, the idea that everyone, he's gonna go to Wakanda, but they think he's gonna go to like one place, Wakanda. Like, I would think he would go to where Vision died in Infinity War, and like go there to contemplate. Like, that's where, like, where do you go? Like, all right, when this big huge thing happened, let me go there and like just be in that space. But the other thing is also like, and I forget who mentioned it earlier, but in Infinity War, they're like, yeah, he's a mix of Tony Stark, he's Bruce Banner, Ultron, the Stone. We don't know like what of Ultron might have been left in Infinity War. Vision was left in there. So he could, to your point, he could go and he could have this inner dialogue of some sort between whatever Vision is now, with the white Vision now, and whatever's left inside maybe of Ultron. And it could be like a whole inside my head thing where he's wrestling with that until he comes out with some reconciliation.
All right, I want to talk about another character that I don't want us to get out of this conversation without discussing this a little bit, because I think it ties into what might be ahead for Marvel in the MCU and the shows. I'm thinking about the character of Pietro in WandaVision, right? And the choice to use the actor Evan Peters, who played the character Quicksilver, who is Wanda's brother in the X-Men movies. Now, I personally liked that version of Quicksilver better. Like, I like Evan Peters as an actor. I thought the effects were better in the X-Men for Quicksilver. Like, I just generally loved that character, and anytime he was on screen, I really enjoyed it. But somebody here explained to me what this means, that they brought back Evan Peters to play Quicksilver or Pietro in this show.
It was just the greatest gag they could possibly pull.
You son of a bitch.
Quicksilver isn't coming back.
I'm not saying that they won't necessarily keep him if we get a mutant crossover. I think that would be wise because I think he's popular. I think it's a good take on the character. It's a lot of fun. But like the fact that he's like what Ralph Boner, I think was his name.
Yeah.
And he's just like their dirtbag uncle.
Yeah.
And he's just like, it was just like a great, like funny bit that they got to work in. And, I'm sure it sent a lot of fanboys and fangirls on the internet, just like salivating and going crazy on Reddit or whatever. But I think it was like a fun troll that doesn't necessarily rule out them doing something in the future with him.
Jason Madrox, what do you think about this?
I agree that it was, as a longtime fan, like it was a wonderful practical joke, and Ralph Boner it hurt so good because I really thought, and I know that based on like at least the acquisition of Fox by Disney and their ability to utilize, mutants in the main MCU, we will see the return of the X-Men, and I think they that version of Quicksilver is so beloved. For me, I love him. I love him in the movies. Quicksilver, if you ever read like the 90s X Factor series that Quicksilver shows up in, to me, that's the quintessential. There's this great scene in which they're doing like a debrief with a therapist, and Quicksilver explains basically why he's an asshole. And he's like, imagine the feeling you have when you're at Burger King and you're trying to place an order and the person behind the counter can't understand, I'm paraphrasing, mind you, can't understand a Whopper without cheese. Or you're at an ATM and the individual in front of you can't seem to figure out how to enter their PIN number correctly. That general annoyance you feel at a world that moves too slow for you. He's like, that is my existence times 1,000-fold. And you would be upset if you had to live like I do, you would be upset too. And it was such for me, like being a nerdy kid sitting there reading comics and being like, wow, I see like a depth to this character I've never seen before. Like, I would love to see that portrayed on television, or sorry, not on television, but in the MCU. But I also absolutely love what they did with him in the Fox universe. So like, I think we'll see him again. I think my question will be though, like how they bring in just the whole mutant world. I mean, because it plays such an important role in Marvel Comics from like 1964 on. And so, you know, we've just been missing it. It's been a giant hole. So
at the very least, this is a wink and a nod of some kind, and maybe even just a signal, maybe not a signal that the mutants are coming in some way, right? Mr. the Professor X, what say you?
You know, they're going to bring in mutants, but the one thing they've already brought in mutants, right? The one thing that Marvel does. And we can get into a discussion between Marvel and DC later. But what Marvel does really well is subtle, right? And to Dynamite's point, this was like, here's your fucking mutants. Here's your fucking mutant, crossover. There you go. Mm-hmm. And that's not what they're going to do. Plus, a speedster like, what's his face? The Maximoff twin is not nearly as powerful as what they need for, next phase villains, right? They need the Jean Greys. They need, Magneto. They need like really powerful mutants to show up and do some damage, not some like speedster. We're talking about outer space. Like, what's this dude going to do in outer space? Or like across dimensions,
right?
So I think it's going to be much, much more subtle than that.
That's interesting. I just want to go around the table because this is. Thought. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen. Scarlett, okay. Jen, go ahead.
It's
please.
Not a very insightful one, but it strikes me like when you guys are talking about like how it's just a joke and whatever, and I think about Agnes, and it's so weird. Like what it evokes for me is Sabrina and the Teenage Witch in Archie comics. Like, and I don't even know why, but like, it's got that, like when I think about comic books, like some of them are really hokey and then some of them are dark. And like, we were talking about this today after we watched Justice League, like how, there was this like 1950s, 60s sentimentality to comics. And it was all like, really hokey kind of stuff. And Agnes feels that way. And like, so then this like whole gag with Evan Peters sort of felt in that same vein in a way.
Yeah. Dynamite.
Yeah, no. So I think that's also sort of interesting because again, the episodes tended to be sort of internally consistent logically with the show that they were aping.
Right.
And so like all of that stuff, like Evan Peters being like sort of the douchey uncle.
Right, from the 90s. He was in the 90s, right? Yeah.
So right, like so they were in like a Modern Family, The Office crossover. And like, I mean, you just had like that hilarious scene with Vision sitting there and talking to the camera and then being like, wait, what am I even doing here?
Yeah.
Like, I loved that. And I think that in some ways sort of, that gives them an out, right? Yeah. It's like they were just being consistent with the logic of the episode. Yeah. That like this is how the characters behaved or did what they did.
Yeah. It was just that end.
And they're free. I think they're free outside of WandaVision to have the characters behave however they would behave in like, let's say, a movie context.
Right. Like when they just had the Agnes reveal and it was like that whole scene at the end where she's wearing the hat and she's like stroking the bunny and like it just, it was me all along. And it was like, it was so cheesy and like.
Yeah. I mean, I think what Marvel never kind of lets you forget, right, is that a lot of, this stuff comes from comic books.
Right, exactly.
It is the DNA of what they're doing. Mr. E.
I was just going to say, with Agatha and the what did they call him in the show? Pietro, like the faux Pietro. When they do the Agatha, it was Agatha all along, and she's out there on the lawn, and she's like, doing her fingers, and he's being controlled in the back. You see like, purple stuff going on at his back when he's talking to Wanda when he first shows up, right? But then towards the end where Monica takes off the necklace, something else happens. So like, I don't know if something was missed there or if they had intended to go in a different direction or something, but like, it was odd that like she had to control him when he was like coming to the door, but then she also had control of him with the necklace. And I don't know if they ever actually said or kind of closed the door, or maybe they left it a little open that maybe he is, a different Pietro, because like we'd never seen anybody else controlled by an actual object in that way before. Like she snaps off and Monica was like, she controlled you with the necklace. There's something that didn't jive there. Continuity of the story.
Jason.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because every other detail of Westview was at very least touched by the Hex. But for some reason, Ralph Boner in his upstairs like dude cave, he had his like a headshot lying around, and it was like this little room that Wanda didn't know about or wasn't able to affect, and I'm hoping there's something there. But I wanted to say something about the idea of like the hokiness. Like I find it's one of the things that I've always loved about Marvel Comics is that they are very subversive, and Marvel Comics, along with every other comic creator in 1954, adopted the Comic Code Authority, which was an industry like regulated group from the Comic Magazine Association of America, because at that point comic books were there was going to be government regulation, there was going to be censorship, so they adopt the Comic Code Authority as like a group of comic providers and creators who will kind of self-censor the industry. And Marvel gets really like, they have played with the rules of that and played with kind of the boundaries of what they can get away with for forever. I mean, it's been part of their storytelling since really 1964 when Stan Lee puts out the X-Men as a thinly veiled metaphor for racism in the US. We really start seeing them play with these things. And so like even Agatha's song, which reads as very hokey, ends with her saying she murdered a puppy.
Right.
Like, and so like, it's one of the things that I love about Marvel is it's right there under the surface. You just have to kind of look for it. So.
I want to keep on the theme of mutants for a second. I know some of us here have said that Wanda is a mutant, potentially. But what I learned from this show is that she's also potentially the subject of a 300-year-old prophecy, right? And how could she be a mutant? Like, anybody have any insight into that? Like, because she was prophesized to come, and that, at least that's what Agatha was saying. And I'm curious. It seems like she's predestined to become the Scarlet Witch. So, anyone want to talk to that, Jason?
So I can tell you like her comic biography, which has been futzed with a lot. So she's introduced as part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, as an X-Men antagonist. She's introduced her and Pietro. Their kind of backstory is they're both mutants. They're rescued from a mob. They're at that point they believe that they are being raised by their biological parents, which were a couple of Romy travelers who were murdered not for raising mutants, but for being Romy, which is kind of beautiful. And they're rescued by Magneto, and so they feel like they owe him a debt, and so they join up with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and they start kind of just being X-Men antagonists. And then I think it was a couple years later, really a short time, Stan Lee moves them over to like Captain America's quirky quintet. It was Captain America, Scarlet Witch, Pietro, Quicksilver, and Hawkeye. as the new Avengers. So they take all of their past Avengers and they put 3 villains with Captain America, and they're the new Avengers. And at that point, they're still solidly mutants, and they go on like that well into like the 80s with the story that she is a mutant. And then I think it's Steve Englehart starts writing her with a magical component, that she has some kind of magic that she can tap into. She meets up with Agatha Harkness. She starts training to control what's deemed chaos magic. It would then be later around the Avengers Disassembled series written by Bendis that Stephen Strange says, like, there's no such thing as chaos magic. That's nonsense. She's an incredibly powerful mutant who's capable of warping reality. She doesn't understand it. She doesn't have control over it, but that's what this is. There's no such thing as chaos magic. And then it would be, I think in 2015, Marvel writes a series called Access, in which she is essentially good guys become bad guys become good guys. And it's introduced that she's actually not a mutant, that she is a purely magical creature. And they do that in part because they wanted to utilize her in the MCU. And Fox at that point had rights to all of the mutant characters. So if they make her not a mutant anymore, it's actually, it's one of the great Marvel business things, like even outside of the comics. Like, they didn't have the right to use these characters. The MCU is becoming more popular. And so they launched like the X-Men versus the Inhumans series, like a kind of in battle between the Inhumans, who are mutant-esque, and the X-Men. And they basically make like mutants irrelevant in their own. They like drive their comic sales of mutants into the dirt so that like they can devalue what Fox owns. So like it's wonderfly scandalous. Wow. So they turned her out. They say, no, she's not a mutant anymore, so we can use her in the films. So like in the MCU, like now that they have the rights to utilize mutants, I think there will be something that they say, like, the reason she survived these tests and the reason that she was able to do what none of our other test subjects could do is because of a mutant gene. And it was activated when she was a baby, because it like either Tony Stark really sucks at making weapons, which we like, there's really no evidence of that. Like, or in this one moment, she alters probability using her mutant power to stop this bomb from going off.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Dynamite.
Yeah. So, back to your point about like the prophecy or whatever for her being the Scarlet Witch. I mean, where is that originating? Who's that from? Again, I think to, the multiple ham point, certainly this could be a way to backdoor mutants into the Marvel universe. If you want to get like real deep on like mutants and Inhumans and all the other stuff, you've got to go all the way back to the Celestials, who are only like vaguely hinted at in the movies. Those Celestials are these basically godlike creatures created by Jack Kirby.
Are those the ones that they're coming out with in the next movie?
No, so this is the Eternals.
The Eternals, okay.
The Eternals were also created by the Celestials, but the Eternals are intended to be the defenders of the Earth. They're sort of like godlike characters. They're probably closer to like an Asgardian as far as like power levels, things like that.
Didn't they wasn't Peter Quill's dad?
Yeah,
his father was
a god.
Right?
Yeah, which is why he could touch the Infinity Stone and not be like vaporized.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the idea being, maybe this is sort of the Celestials meddling, right? Like that they have intended that like billions of years of genetic evolution will lead to mutants being created, one of whom becomes the Scarlet Witch and then does whatever. I mean, the plot line starts getting really abstract at that point, but I think that could be an interesting character beat that they could, certainly they've already got talk about the Eternals being a film, like they're making it, I guess. So who knows? Maybe it'll be a tie-in there.
Yeah,
they're quite good about doing their cross promotions.
Mr. E.
I was just say it could have also something of the Chaos Magic or the Scarlet Witch, that ilk could have been seen hundreds and hundreds of years ago, because we had things way back in the past, like Apocalypse has been around for like a long time, right? And so like way back when, people could have seen like some crazy shit go down with Apocalypse level folks walking around on the earth, and like, oh my god, this happened, and so what we're calling a prophecy now could have just been like, watch out for this, because when this happens, things go really, really bad. And so the Earth might have, in that universe, might have already seen somebody of the Scarlet Witch's ilk and the capability to cause some really bad stuff to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So her mutant status aside, when we leave Wanda at the end of this show, where is she? Is she evil? Is she? I mean, she doesn't look like she's in a good place. Mr. the Professor X.
I don't think that it would be fair to characterize Wanda as good or evil. I don't think it's that simple. She's had a taste of family, right? And, I think any one of us would do anything for somebody, right? So put that somebody in danger and peril, then I'm sure that we'd be capable of doing all kinds of immoral things, right? So if you're about to run if someone's gonna, if a dog's gonna come and attack my kid and I'm driving my car, I'm gonna run the dog over, right? So that's sort of an immoral thing, but I did it for the good of my child. So I don't think it's really necessarily about as clean cut as good or evil. I think there's a great deal of ambiguity there.
Okay.
I think she's also at the beginning of a journey of self-discovery, and I think Vision is as well. And I think that's what's kind of fascinating about, where these characters go next.
And I think, we could see that's a really nice setup. Like, you got two people on much different paths of self-discovery. It'd be really interesting, to see them, come back together, and, either they are, they identify and that unites them, or like they're too different and they explode on each other. Like,
Night Scrawler.
Yeah, no, I think that it has a real potential to be tragic when they finally come back together again, because they're going to be completely different people or beings or whatever it is. And I'm sure that all of that emotion is going to be super heightened. And yeah, there's no way that they'll ever be able to work again. It's just, it's destined to fail. And they may even, it may even come to like blows at some point, because that's something that comics are famous for as well. And it would just be one of those really heartbreaking things I could see them throwing into, either probably not another series, but definitely at least a movie though.
I hadn't even contemplated that. Scarlett Jen, I just sort of assumed that they were going to go off and come back together.
I'm going to fight you.
You're going to fight me?
Yeah.
They still could. They still could.
I think Jason wanted to say something.
Yeah. Jason Madrox, the multiple ham, please.
No, I think it's one of the things, again, that Marvel Comics has done well for years, but the MCU has done so beautifully, is that it has introduced the idea that evil and good, it boils down to where you're at. Like, when we look at like in the Black Panther movie, Warmonger, like, arguably had some really good points about how Wakanda was being run. Whether you like it or lump it, Thanos, when he's like, people need to, I've traveled the universe. I am a universal citizen. The universe is finite and its resources are only go so far. We see this again and again and again, where we have characters who may embark on something that arguably is immoral, but their rationale behind it is you have to say they have points.
Mm-hmm.
And with Wanda, we have this deeply traumatized person. You know, she grew up in a war zone. Like, she has, you know, her home country was destroyed because of Tony Stark's arrogance around, you know, what he could build and what he could do. And, you know, she sacrificed the one person that she loved and had it taken back and then had to watch them die. She lives through all of this stuff. And, you know, what she does with that, you know, who knows? Who knows how any of us would react? And then you add the abilities that she has on top of that, and you have a really sympathetic character. And just from, you know, a personal point of view, God, I hope there's a Vision versus Wanda throwdown. Like I said, I'm all about lights and colors, less Gabby, more Stabby. Like, let's see these two go to, you know.
And we know,
plus, I come from a dysfunctional family, so parents fighting is all I know.
and we know Wanda's gonna end up in the next Doctor Strange movie. I think we heard that, didn't we? Did I hear that right? I'm seeing some nods here. It'll be interesting to see presumably she's going to be on some kind of collision course with Doctor Strange as well. I would guess. And maybe he's going to try to help her.
Does anybody know if Benedict Cumberbatch has how many deals left in his movie contract?
Oh, man. I mean,
because in the comics, I know she becomes Sorcerer Supreme at one point.
Oh.
Ooh.
That'd be interesting.
Mm.
I think they now are standard, like going on for, like, they're signing for multiple deals at once, you know, like multiple pictures at once. That's just a standard rule.
I just didn't know if he was getting tired and was going to, I mean, like Chris Evans, like, you know, God bless the man. He did an amazing job. And
he bowed out.
He did. And you know what? He earned it. He earned it.
But he's coming back now. Right?
Is he? Oh, thank God.
I think he's coming back in like a very limited context for some of the shows, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, I don't know about you all, but when they first announced the Captain America movies, the first one, I was really skeptical. And I went to go see that movie and I was just blown away by it. I was blown away by Chris Evans. Like, it just, what an amazing.
On paper, it should not have worked.
No, but what an amazing character and performance. It was great. All right. Circling us back to WandaVision, anything you all are dying to talk about before we wrap up? Believe it or not, we're coming up on 2 hours here.
Damn.
I just wanted to say, like, how funny the show was and how amazing that it was that they were able to do that even in the early episodes when it's sort of like that corny 50s humor, but they still were able to like get laughs. Like, I legit laughed out loud at like some of the just like really dumb things, like with like Vision, like eating the gum or whatever. And I just thought it was really neat that they were able to, like, within the context of the episode, still keep it funny and make it relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts or reflections about the show, Jason?
Again, like, I thought it was just, along with being a really entertaining and exciting, like, Marvel property to watch, it was just this beautiful love letter to American television. And like, and the sitcom, and the first couple episodes, my oldest son, he loves MASH and he loves I Love Lucy, absolutely loves Lucy. And this moment of like watching this and realizing that like these things endure for a reason. Like, they endure and they go on from generation to generation for a reason, and there's a real magic to it. And to watch Marvel and Disney like really send it up and use it in that way, that felt just like beautiful and like really sweet was to me just kind of this it made me happy during the pandemic, and not saying a lot.
Yeah. Scarlett Jen, any thoughts? You weren't expecting me to go to you. I'll let you think about it.
I was not expecting
Mr. E, please.
I was just gonna I was thinking a little bit along a similar track as Jason. Like it was very good. Like I said at the beginning, like Marvel did a great job with the show, streaming like that and that kind of format and that kind of approach. I think it set a bar for things like that for success in the future. But I think it also, the time that it came out and the time that it was viewed, I think got greater exposure, maybe greater buy-in, and certainly a whole lot of hype and involvement in like online engagement about something that was brand new. And I think, that contributed to the success of it, because there was so much like engagement theory, so much of that I had not seen about other shows. And there's so much, and then there's like all the speculation for a whole week, and then let's do what happened. And then all the speculation for a week, and then, let's do what happened. And I think that it would have been it was still been great. It was still been a wonderful show, but I think it was enhanced by the time that it came out.
Yeah.
Viewership. And it made people happy. It was this thing that you could do. Mm-hmm. And just the time of it gave it a greater welcome.
Yeah. And I love that. And especially with a comic book based property, right? You have to wait for the next thing to come out, right? Like I love that. And I know more streaming shows are doing that now. And I actually like really appreciate having a fucking thing to look forward to, and not having it all at my fingertips. And I think it works really well with a comic book property. Mr. the Professor X, please.
Just wanted to echo how brilliantly Marvel has created these characters that one can empathize with, right? We've heard along the last 2 hours, how they create these stories, but with superheroes, right? That's this everyday thing, but with superheroes. I think someone mentioned that earlier. This show didn't need a big baddie, right? It didn't need like this evil super being. Arguably, Agatha was that, but like she wasn't like Thanos level, baddie. Like we waited 12 years for Thanos or however long. And it was pretty in your face, first with Loki and with the other guy, whomever, and with an invasion in New York. And then we had, Ultron as this big baddie, and even going back to Red Skull, right? We've always had like big baddies, but now the big baddie is like internal, right? The idea of loss, the idea of sacrifice, like things that people can really relate to. That's like inherently like a human experience, but with superheroes, right? Well, how does that look like? And it's really, really exciting.
That's like the new hashtag, but with superheroes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dynamite.
Night Scrawler, what are your thoughts here as we're heading out the door?
So I'm going to miss the show. Like I already miss it. And I have to say, there's something about not having a single Marvel movie all of last year. Like the last movie was Far From Home, right? That was 2019. And so we went all of 2020, all of what that was and what that meant with not a single Marvel production. And you kind of forget, you forget how well they do it. And so having it, missing Black Widow, because I'm not, that it's going to be good. They never really failed to deliver, but having that get pushed off and then having WandaVision show up at the beginning of this year to the end of the pandemic as things are going to start, there's hope happening. And we got that show and the way that it built and just kind of gave us a week to week. It was like the nicest kind of slide out of this shitstorm of a year into all of the greatness that like Marvel can give us. And so I missed the show, and I'm excited for Falcon and Winter Soldier. And those are two other characters that I haven't had a lot of interest in. And I have watched the first episode already. I'm not going to say anything about it though, but I trust I trust Marvel with what they do, and I like that we have another bunch of weeks to look forward to leading into Black Widow, which I am looking forward to. But anyway, I'm going to miss it.
Yeah. And what I love about the show, right, and maybe even more so than the movies, is how much it's drawn. It goes a little bit to what you were saying, Night Scrawler. Like, it's keeping me engaged, right, with this property, and it's drawing me in terms of. It's
not just like us at our older years, right? Like, it's something you can watch as a family with your kids, and like. Yeah. I mean,
but like as I'm reading,
they're just as excited as we get.
Yeah, they do, and
they get such excitement out of it.
And I love the attention and love the creators have for the fans and all of the little Easter eggs. And I love watching the show, then going online and reading about all of these things. Like, oh, they had some kind of representation of the Mind Stone in the wallpaper or on the door. And
that was the thing. Like, when I went back and I was like, all right, I have to go watch Age of Ultron. And then we went down a rabbit hole watching a couple movies, and like we all sat down and we're like, it all tied in. It's like you saw the plan. Like, you didn't notice it when you're watching it, but you could see it watching back the movies. You're like, oh my God, they knew exactly where they were going. Yeah. They had a plan. It was well thought out, it was strategized.
And if anything is going to get me back into a movie theater, it's going to be one of these goddamn Marvel movies, right? Like, that's what it's going to be. Like, all right.
I want to see another, the Spider-Verse, the multi. Oh my God, I fucking love that movie.
Well, the next Spider-Man is gonna be a live action Spider-Verse. No, I know what you're saying.
I liked the comic thing. That was phenomenal. The music, everything about that movie was incredible.
I want to say they're working on one, Jeff.
Yeah. We need more Miles Morales Spider-Man.
No, and I'm not even saying that character. No, I'm just saying that whole. The way,
but we need him. We need him in that movie style.
Semicolon, whatever. Like, I love that genre feel that they evoked in that movie.
I can tell you love it.
The street arty kind of feel. Like sorry, I'm gonna stop.
You feel strongly.
I do. I have like a certain aesthetic I like.
No one's stepping on your aesthetic. It's Scarlett Jen.
It's very specific.
She's starting to glow. Should I worry?
All right, enough.
All right. My podcast Avengers. Let me just say, we have spent over 2 hours together.
I backwards from sitting in this chair.
And it has felt like 4. But I will say, no, I'm just kidding. It has felt like an hour to me. I enjoyed hearing your expertise. I enjoyed discussing WandaVision with you all.
We'll have to do one at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to do a Justice League one, but that's aside from the facts here.
I would love to be on a Justice League one.
A quick point.
Yes.
A quick point about the Snyder Cut. I haven't seen it yet, but some of the analysis that I was reading was, talking about how, like, I was reading The Root, right? And they were talking about how, like, they really screwed over the Cyclops character, right? Because they the Cyborg. They cut like his whole backstory, all that stuff, and so like that's what's so smart about the Marvel TV strategy, right? Is like you can move all of that stuff into the TV property, and then the movie is free to just be like a self-contained story without all of the like, how do I set up all these characters?
And again, that's a whole other conversation, right? And I'd love to do one.
Yeah, we'll set up another panel.
Okay, we'll set up a panel. Now,
and Mr. the Professor X is not interested in that one.
So what I'm going to say, I want to thank you all individually. Okay, this will be quick. Scarlett Jen.
Oh,
always a great co-host. Always a great co-host. Night Scrawler. Thank you. Appreciate you coming and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. the Professor X, what can I say? You always bring the knowledge, the passion, the long-winded explanations, but we love them. Thank you.
It was a nice job cutting me off. I appreciate it.
Jason Madrox, the Multiple Ham. The most creative name
The deep cuts.
The very, very deep cuts.
Very deep.
They were very much appreciated, and we loved them. And we love you.
While everyone else was out like living their life, I was in my bedroom reading comic books, and gosh darn it, it's finally paying off. So.
Thank you for being here. We really appreciate having you here and talking to you. Mr. E, what can I say? Except thank you. Your passion is infectious. I'm glad I can't catch it from here over the internet. It's so infectious. Thank you.
Alrighty.
Dynamite. An explosive contribution to the podcast.
His debut
on the Soft Serve podcast. You'll get one of those. That's a special honor. The other guests here may or may not attest to that. Now,
Sawclops. What's your name again?
Sawclops.
Sawclops. Excellent job facilitating and moderating this panel this evening.
Now, I'm going to retract my praise to you as a co-host because you forgot to thank Space Unicorn.
Oh, she disappeared after 2 seconds.
I did not forget. Space Unicorn, wherever you are, thank you. Now,
she was technically kicked out.
No, she technically took the earbuds out of her ears and said, I'm leaving now. Goodbye.
This was a lot of fun, and I love taking the back seat to a bunch of experts and passionate fans and hearing you all share your thoughts. So, again, thank you to our listeners. I won't drag this on, although I feel tempted to because Scarlett Jen really wants to get out of here. To our fans and our listeners, we love you. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, download, share with a friend, blah, blah, blah. And anything. Is there some kind of Avengers shout we can do at the end?
No.
All right. No?
No.
All right. Well, we'll just say the thing.
All right. Bye now.
All right. Bye now.
This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility. That all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. And that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road.